Thank you for tuning in to this second video about how the Supreme Court works. Essentially, once they've chosen a case, it works like this. The lawyers and outside interest groups and government agencies all submit data and information about that case. So, for example, if it's a case about guns and whether or not a state can restrict gun access, you're going to see groups like the National Rifle Association, the NRA, that's going to want to have some sort of say on that. So they're going to send in data and information about gun violence and gun ownership so that the courts can make a good decision and because they want to be able to influence that court decision. Also, agencies are going to provide stuff. So maybe on that exact same case, the FBI or the CIA are going to provide information about crime in or outside of the United States involving guns. Certainly possible. They submit reports to the judges, and the justices only hear lawyers speak for about 30 minutes. So each side gets 30 minutes to make an argument. Sometimes it goes longer if there's questions by the justices. But it's supposed to be a short amount of time so they can get through the cases. And because most things should have been essentially brought up in previous cases at the circuit court or the district court. So earlier courts probably handled a lot of the questions they would ask. It's completely open to the public. No photography or anything like that is allowed, though. So I only have a picture of the empty courtroom. They then go into the back and discuss. Sometimes it takes days or weeks of discussion. And then finally they vote. And each of them gets a vote. And so when you think about it, how do you determine who wins then? Well, it takes 5 votes or more to declare a winning side. So we have 9 justices, so 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9 of them have to side one way or the other, and that's just the decision. That's final, essentially. Once they've finally decided things, they go back to their offices, and they have to write up an explanation as to why they chose that side. And then the results are posted on their website. The winning side, the majority side, writes up what's called the majority opinion. And it's a gigantic document that explains why they voted the way they did. So they'll use information from past court cases, information about statutes and laws, all the information they use to back it up. The losing side writes up what's called the minority opinion or the dissenting opinion. It means they disagree. So any of the judges have the right to explain why they disagreed with the majority. And that does happen, that it's 5 versus 4, and the 4 all write up different opinions on why they voted no. But the catch is oftentimes with the judicial branch, well, not oftentimes, this rarely comes up, the judges don't have a police force. They don't have an army. So if they make a decision and the executive branch and the legislative branch ignore it, it may just go on being ignored. Same thing happened when the case of Brown versus Board of Education happened. It desegregated schools, and some places ignored it. They just ignored what the Supreme Court said, and it was forced upon the executive branch to force those states to listen. Now, since we're talking about the actual court cases, let's talk about the powers of the judicial branch. They really have 2 big powers. One power was created because of a court case called Marbury versus Madison. It's the first big court case you need to know. Essentially, it happens right at the beginning of the 1800s, and it creates the power of judicial review. Judicial review is the idea that the Supreme Court can decide if laws or actions go against the Constitution or if they're all right. So to use an example we already talked about, if there were a law about gun restrictions, they may strike it down as going against the Second Amendment, which is part of our Constitution. So the law would be seen as unconstitutional. So if something the legislative branch does or the executive branch does might go against the Constitution, you can sue, and the judicial branch, the Supreme Court in particular, will decide if that is truly unconstitutional or not. In this action, they're basically interpreting laws. Now, whenever they make a decision, it's kind of like creating a rule itself. So it creates what we call precedent. And you may have heard that on like TV shows or movies when someone's referencing precedent. Essentially, it's past court decisions that have created almost like a rule. So in Brown versus Board of Education, they basically created a rule that says you can't segregate your schools. It doesn't have to be stated anywhere in like a law because the Supreme Court has already ruled on it. But occasionally, they can change their past precedent. Now, that's all the notes on the judicial branch. So, I'm ending the video.